And speaking of disagreements and everything, in my last, little short video, there's going to be tons of people, especially the Alba stars, that use the guise of child protection to like torture people, essentially for life, but they play hot potato with it. So they're like, it's all good, and then they're like manifesting hell and they're looking around and they're like, wow, it's like we live in hell. And it's like, yeah, because in like every aspect of life, you're doing something evil. Whether you're at the food bank providing poisonous food to the children, or at a grocery store, you know, um, and they roofie molest a lot of targets, a lot of people, and they do it for recruitment. So there's this eyes wide shut shit going on. There's a fair, chunk of the population that's into all that weird, underage sexual stuff. And I'm not saying like I'm not joining the pedos, but I'm not joining the fucking child protectors either. Y'all fucking using your shit to manifest a greater hell on earth and everything. And, so there's that aspect, providing shitty food, poisonous food. There's all sorts of fucking things that are masked in niceness that are secretly evil. And creating homeless populations, then installing your maybe nicer empath family members in the little nepotism, schemes that they do. You're going to be in charge of this nonprofit organization making, 200K a year. You're going to, we made, 100,000 homeless people, but you're going to help out like 500. All right, even Steven? And it's like, no, not even Steven, and it gets a little messy and murky when it's, like, yeah, you're benefiting financially. They were going to try to do that to me. They offered me this, like the head of this organization, and I'm going to help people out. As opposed to what I actually want to do will help the whole planet out and my allies. Will help the whole planet out, as opposed to me helping a few hundred people a year or something like that. Teaching people how to fucking like make it in your stupid like made up society. There's a lot of made up jobs. I see it, and it's just like, oh my god. For decades, for our grandparents and great grandparents, they had all sorts of fruiting trees around, but they got rid of them because they dirty up the sidewalk. So now they use that niceness as an evil, so now you're dependent on their fucking bullshit system, like the grocery stores, and you can't feed yourself or your family, without their fucking bullshit. And that's the, like, you guys could turn this around really quickly. You guys have big, could be beautiful yards and everything, but you just slap, like, grass on it most of the time. And it's like, well, you fucking, like, grow some food, yo. You got some space. I have a fucking balcony. I'm like in an apartment and shit. It's like really hard to grow. I see the garden beds down below that are actually touching the surface of the earth are like thriving and shit, while mine in the sky, not touching the earth, is struggling. But they're also fucking with the light too. They've been fucking with the light. They're like, look, we gotta fucking block out the sun and blah blah blah. A lot of our made up bullshit, and then the sunflowers aren't tracking the fucking sun anymore, and other flowers that are like that. I forget what that process is called, but it like, the flower petal faces the sun. Yeah, they're not doing that anymore, and nature, has these whispers, just like the insect population is dying because you're using all this glyphosate everywhere. And actually, I mean, in the wild and everything, the insect population is fine. It's just when you're passing even through the farmlands, because that's where you're using the glyphosate, and then the developed areas, quote unquote developed areas, you don't see insects anymore, but they're like an important part of the balance of things, and then these guys throw things out of balance. You know, I'd be fantasizing about making a fort in the wilderness. I do need to really get my book done so I could earn some money to get a place somewhere. I'd like to just like be in nature, have a nice little fort where I could maybe help myself and a lover and maybe a few others. You know, I wouldn't mind helping people build, you know, a bit like Robin Hood, you know, and the Kevin Costner version, which, you know, very light because there's a lot of dark shit in Hollywood. And not everyone part of it is dark, but a lot of people get controlled by the darkness, you know, with contracts. And, you know, like Candace Owens said, like, you know, Kanye was right about shit. And this goes back to like Prince and Michael Jackson and everything and beyond, or before them. Uh, and, uh, and yeah, so yeah, they just kind of like openly do it though, all that weird sexual stuff. And you're just going to have to like let families be families because they've totally weaponized that shit. And then they're doing it anyway. And then they're doing it anyway. And then they're fucking like, look, you guys got to follow our standards that we fucking writ for you and your, you know, and your ancestors, you know, for a few generations at least, you know. And yeah, I think all the birth control stuff kind of throws it off because when your daughter was getting, you know, when your 15, 16-year-old daughter was getting knocked up by some 23 or 24-year-old dude or whatever, then you were like, well, welcome to the family, Billy, you know, type shit. Instead of like, we gotta fucking make a big attack and how dare, and it's like, yeah, I you know, especially with the young adults and the almost adults, it's like, man, you guys got real fucking problems on this fucking planet, and that if it is one of them, it's going to rank somewhere a little lower on that fucking spectrum of fucking problems. I'm just saying. I know a lot of people don't like it, and you're just going to have to deal with that, and I'm fine with that. They're going to be like, Chris, you're like a pedo. And it's like, actually, like, what do you call, like, you know, when you have the community rape me, roofie rape me, since I was a child into my adulthood while strictly using underagers? What do you call that? Is there a word for it? Could I have a word, please, to describe this? You know, and that's what they do, you know, and there's a lot of the child protectors, they don't realize what they're getting into. You know, they're like, look, there's this adults and everything, but with the whole backstory that you don't know about, but look, they're just like a predator. We're also secretly trying to recruit them for our little eyes wide shut shit. But also, you know, they're a predator. And this is how we operate because, you know, everything we say is fucking, you know, a lie. Unless it's behind closed doors with our other cult members that have taken these vows. You know, they are famously the Zeke, the Zayazits. You know, so yeah. And you're always going to have problems if you're going to have freedoms and everything, and it's not, you know, it's not to say like don't try to help those people out that get kidnapped and held against their will. But when you have like programs that are like we're going to set this up with the Wi-Fi and do use AI and image through the walls and everything, we're going to help people out. Well, that system's controlled by fucking evil people, and they're not going to do. They're going, oh yeah, we're going to totally be helpful, and then you know how helpful have they been? Really, not. So why even have the fucking system in the fucking first place? You know, like the Wi-Fi through the wall scanning and imaging that they clearly do, and that's clearly why they got rid of fucking like lead and paint. And they work generationally, like I said, you know, and people are like, well, evil just gathers and does things generationally. And it's like, yeah, well, people do that like for good too, you know, and they improve upon farming methods and techniques and everything and tools. You know, so why is it so hard to believe that it's the fucking other way around? I mean, what the fuck? You know, that's what, like, someone involved, you know, would say. Like, I noticed the involvement, like, that person that was like telling, like when Candace Owens released the Charlie Kirk messages just recently and showed that Charlie was like instinctively like, I should talk to Candace. And then the infiltrator, pretending to be their friend or whatever, Charlie's friend, was like, you should just like hold off on that because they're trying to create that division between actual friends. It's something that my family had experienced and everything. So, and they like to create that division, divide and conquer, and you see these repeated patterns of behavior, and it makes total sense. So there was that infiltrator that was like, look, you should give it some time and blah, blah, blah. God would say, chill, Charlie. Or it was, I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that. They threw God in there, because they're trying to be manipulative, and he didn't want, they didn't want Charlie giving Candace any more ammo, right? Because she might have recorded the conversation and all that stuff. So, and that's fair to do too. Like, I mean, it's not a betrayal. It's, collecting some secret receipts. Maybe secretly recording a friend talking about some, stuff that's stressing him or her out would be nice because, had Candace done that, she could bring even more receipts. Or if someone righteous, did that. And it's not to have blackmail on them. It is like, look, this person, I'm going to just, have this on the side just in case. And that would have been look, I would have never released it, but, they ended up assassinating Charlie. So then, and now I'm releasing it, so, and that would have been some helpful insights. I wonder how many conversations they had that if one of them was recorded, it would have been, really helpful for him and his fans to see clear what the fuck is going on, because everyone can't see straight, because the waters are muddied really well, and that's one of their tactics too, is to muddy the waters. But they started doing that shit, like, and Charlie, had the good instinct to be like, look, I just want to talk to my friend Candace. And that was a nice, good instinct, to have. And then there was that infiltrator, I totally suspect, whoever that fucking was, that was like, oh no, don't do that. That is total red flag shit right there. And then throwing in God and everything, however the fuck they did it, they're just totally manipulative. Totally manipulative, just trying to steer Charlie Kirk, and it's all sad and everything. They did this to Charlie, but they groom millions of people. They have all sorts of bread and circus people. They don't need to control everyone. They just need to control enough to make enough influence to get the results they want. So they get people in positions of power, in government. Mayors and judges and cops and people in military, and the store managers. Store managers are likely to be like Zionist influence. That wouldn't be like the bagger or the checkout clerk. It would be the one that they're hooking up at the top of these places. So yeah, like a grocery store has like a couple dozen employees, maybe 3, and how do you control that? Well, you could do it with one person, with the manager at the top, so that, and then they're like, okay, so we only need to, infiltrate, 1 out of 40, positions of power, or like, they're like, there's 300 million people, there's like 100,000, positions of power. They're like, yeah, we're only a few million people, but if we get into, make our people in all those influential positions of power, whether it's sports, and yeah, they kind of just like, they've been doing it for a while. So, but I'm not for this grandstanding, like, on this child protection, while y'all motherfuckers are like allowing your children to be brain damaged and poisoned. and feed them nonsense like in school and whatnot, and that's where they do all their MK Ultras, and then they do this family division, like that Tyler family. Like my family reacted, because I went through the same similar, type of bullshit. So, my family, Tyler like reminded me of my family, and they showed an image, because they're like, they've probably been MK ultraing, mind controlling that kid, torturing him ever since he was a child. And they always get their community people to be like, man, there's a problem with your son Tyler. And then they blast an image of him on the TV, and then that gets the fucking family to like, turn their son in, even though the kid wasn't involved. And they just got his family to like turn him in, and now they're like setting it up to like secretly murder him inside a fucking jail, and they're like just making up that the dude is suicidal, and so they could put him in the suicide wing and use that as the story, because they like to think at least a few steps ahead. So anyway, you folks take care. Anyway, so I forget what I was talking about, but someone came up here to be here a little longer than just passing by like the previous person. Probably heard their footsteps or saw me wave or something. I don't always keep my hand in view here of the camera. Suck at all this camera shit. Nothing the Zeke are good at. But yeah, so I'm not into all that grandstanding to, Child Protective Services like has like a 80% if not more sexual abuse rate. Fucking, they're harvesting your children and using the public school system mainly. They're turning them into sex slaves and mass shooters and drug addicts. And then they steer them, like they're like, "Oh, we want to try to railroad someone. Well, let's see if we could get them on meth or heroin. Send them Billy. We got them hooked on that stuff using our DARE program." And our selected gang members that were supposed to do this, like they use the street gangs and everything too, the cops, and yeah, I didn't really I hear they're like the DARE program was to encourage people to use drugs, lately, and it's like yeah. I didn't. They're like, yeah, this is a really awesome drug. Totally have like, insane orgasms and everything, but it's gonna like fuck up, your body, as well. Don't do it, guys. All right, you fucking teenagers that are all fucking starting to get horny and everything. It's like, what the fuck? They didn't really say it like that and everything, but they have their ways of speaking and getting people curious. Just the power of suggestion is a manipulative thing. And it can be used for evils. I noticed that when I would shop with my grandmother a lot, and she was very nice with me, and she would get me, just thinking that she's doing right, but even though I'm eating a bunch of poisons, like, do you want the vanilla or the chocolate? And or the cherry or apple, and when I would suggest these things, or yeah, she wouldn't ask me, I would ask her. She's like, "You want to get one?" And I'm like, do you want the pumpkin or the apple? And whatever I said first was what she wanted. So if I said pumpkin or apple, she would be like pumpkin. If I said it apple or pumpkin, she would say apple. And I started to kind of feel bad about that. So I'm like, no, which one do you want? Because I'm like trying to get her to choose. So there's always people trying to get me to make choices for other people. And I could do that too at times. I'm like, man, no, fuck that one. They sound like, like a demon. Get away. you know? It's up to other people to listen to it or not. So yeah. And they don't need to listen to it. I guess a lot of it's opinion. But I am the greeter into hell and everything, so I mean, there's that. But yeah, I'm not into manifesting a little hell. It's just like, okay, so like, they had a kid like play around me just now, which is like whatever, fine. I'm chilling here. I had to not smoke when they're here. It is a park, so technically I'm not supposed to do it. I'm like breaking the law, but you got all your vehicles and everything, and you're feeding your kids poison, and then you're like, oh, it's my cigarettes. Like, go fuck the fuck off. Fuck the fuck off. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. So anyway, no, I don't think that was an offer, but that's like some of the stuff that the child protectors do. They're like, look, let's get our kids to be around him, and it's like, look, I don't care. Thanks for not roofing me and molesting me. Thanks. Appreciate that. They're off in the distance there. Right, Cat? I know. It's what do you call that? What do you call that? Is there has to be a word for it. Like the zyophile or something like that. I got zyophiled a whole lot when I was fucking, younger. Yeah, zyophile. Zyophilia? It's the art of, adults having their children roofie molest children into their adulthood while maintaining, the children age. So they collect, it's like a group effort. But you see them do that group effort shit in Palestine, you know? And then, they target the ones in power. It's amazing they're able to get away with all the bullshit, but, like I was saying about something in one of the last videos. Oh yeah, that they one of these Zionist organizations is like a 501c3. Oh yeah, Turning Points USA, because he was created by Zionists to influence the youth, Charlie. So they care more about his audience, and that's why they put on a big show and everything. That the memorial, and they rented it out months prior to, and they could just do that periodically. I don't know if they fulfilled, why they rented it out, but they probably like, just in case, we have so much money and everything, it's nice to get it, to have these things in advance. Just like they used, all right, they used the wars, whether it was bombs or sanctions, to fuck up all these other countries, and then you pour in a bunch of immigrants to create a war on the people. But you're like, and then you mask it in, oh, well, you don't care about immigration. Just like they make a bunch of fat people by poisoning the food supply mainly, and all the water. And then they're like, oh, you don't care about fat people? Well, like, oh, man, you should take your time out of your day and, make sure they, get unfat and everything. They make a bunch of people with, like, cerebral palsy and fucking Down syndrome and other, diseases. And then they're like, oh, well, you gotta, cater to them. And yeah, you should take care of people, but it's also, used as a distraction. So you're not focused on, all the stuff that, the things that gave your loved ones diseases. No. You're focused on just kind of treating what people already done. Like the IDF blowing off a bunch of limbs and shit, and then there's all these like limbless people roaming around, and they're purposely like keeping them alive, so they hold, in a sense, how the Zeke see it, they hold other people back. They're like, yeah, we created these totally dependent people now, while never addressing the fucking real fucking problem, is the thing. And you got to learn to, like, walk and chew gum too, because they get us walking but not chewing gum. And they're like, yeah, walk over there, I have nothing against disabled people. I have a problem with the stuff that's creating the disabled people, if you don't mind. Sorry, not sorry. So yeah. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Don't, as I said in the previous video, don't manifest that stuff, and then what your thoughts and vibrations and frequencies you put on the universe, and the universe responds to that almost like a matrix. That's why it can seem very simulation-y, and it's almost like a form of magic, because it is a form of magic, and that's why they like to put people on a low vibration without even knowing that they're on a low vibration. Like could like, what the fuck, uh yeah, just like what happened to me, the zyophilia that happened to me. uh you just like torture someone from childhood into their adulthood. You're likely part of the eyes wide shut crowd, but I can't really tell, and I'm not really like looking. All right. But and then they go around and then torture you into adulthood like you're some sort of predator. And that's a total psychological warfare tactic. That's total psychological warfare 101 as well. But then then they get good people to do this, because the way they fucking do it, and they're like, oh, we're just helping out the community and everything. But what you're really doing is you're contributing to someone's lifelong torture, thus creating that low vibration. But you don't think you're not making honey when you're really making piles of shit with rope on it. They don't want you to think that. They're like, no, this is for the best, and it's great and everything, and doing yourself a service, and da 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 da. And it's no. So I'm one of the designated assholes to talk about this, because I lived through it. Maybe they had to torture me so much to get me to be the incarnate that I am. Because there's that saying from Mother fucking Teresa that the suffering brings us closer to God, and it's like, yeah, no shit. That's why they fucking really took advantage of my mainly asexuality. So I'm like an asexual, all right, and I have a hard time with like other people, but there's like a few that it's been easy with. And they noticed this when I was a child, when they would, I'm pretty sure, okay, so there was like a saboteur family, and my family did some weird shit with me, but they were like trying to hook me up with like kids my age and my peer group, and that was nice, but it was still traumatizing for me. So they're like, why is that? Why is this sexual stuff so traumatizing for Chris? And that's, I think, how they identify us light ones, as children, because they do, some sexual stuff to us, and it's more traumatizing than usual. Where, like, I'm pretty sure I was roofied those times I said I was roofied, but there's also a whole bunch of times I probably don't remember because of that instant amnesia when someone sexually abuses me, even in a slight fucking way. Most of the time, I would say. So yeah. I mean, I think I've been like hit in the nuts with like someone's bag in a crowded fucking space, moving by or something. Did that make me fucking have amnesia? No. But that one time in my 20s, there was I was at this one party, and there was a dude that grabbed my nuts, and it ended up getting into a fight. But I don't remember the actual nut grab. I remember the before and especially after, and either everyone was like making up that I got grabbed, which I'm sure they have the ability to do, but I doubt that was the case then. And yeah, I just totally blanked it out. Interesting. So yeah, yeah. And you get to my book. It's been nice lately. Yeah, see, when the government shut down, and then you just let the states kind of fucking do their thing, And that's the way it should be. This Fed shit really gotta fucking go or be toned down. When like Rand Paul talks about smaller government being the solution, yeah, I totally agree with that dude on that shit, and other, conservatives. Like, yeah, it's like the big government that's going around setting neighborhoods on fire, masking it in fucking a wildfire that they also fucking create, just so they can make up their global warming, so they could poison you more and fuck with you more and put up more false signals that get people to, lash out. It's like there's that men that stare at goats stuff that the CIA does, and they tried like stopping hearts and everything in the movie. But what if there was a bunch of people trying to urge someone on to be violent or to harm themselves or something like that, and that psychic, when you're like, man, pizza sounds really good, and then your like, partner or friend is like, oh, I was just thinking about pizza, and it's like, yeah, you picked up on that, because there is that ESP stuff that they totally gaslight people on. And another thing I just thought of is, how they mask the psychics at the James Randi Educational Foundation, which is also funded, secretly by the CIA. That's set up by the CIA, and all the atheist groups are set up by the CIA and encouraged by CIA or their assets to do such. You start blasting them with dues in the spot, that you're testing them in. And you could do this, you could set up equipment, they did it with me very easily, with like, just a couple suitcases, and, people could have it in the car, and it could hit me, like it's tuned to my frequency or DNA, which is why they like collecting DNA and everything of others. So they could obviously get their DNA too beforehand, so they could specialize these weapons to affect that particular psychic that's being tested, and it totally gaslights the psychic, because they're like, man, I get this right like all the time, and I totally fairly test myself and everything, and it's all legit. And then I come to this James Randi thing, and it's like, yeah, because they put all these dues around you, right, to fuck with your fucking mind and to disconnect you for a little bit, so then your intuition gets fucked up, and then you think it's this particular card when it's really that. But you would have actually gotten it right had they not done all that. But they and then they do this shit like silently and wirelessly. It's like a war that's out in the open that nobody really could see. And yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, oh, you guys are fucking a bunch of Christians and Catholics, right? Because that's what makes up most of America, and I think Europe is tricked into funding and supplying the blowing up of Jesus's people, because y'all can't do enough. Like, and the protests are nice. It's not that's the controlled opposition. They're like, let them protest. We'll have the fucking cops deal with that shit. You guys gotta. There was enough protests in Italy, I think, where it turned into something like a general strike, and that was probably the thing that like. And you guys could have done that all along, though. Is the thing. You guys could have just fucking general striked it until like we get our government back, and shit like that. And you're like, look, just general strike for this crumbs of blowing up. These people, stop doing it, even though we've been asking for like 2 years. And then you're like, grateful to get the crumbs. You're like, oh man, I need a vacation now. And it's like, well, no, like, you fucking keep that momentum going and get more, actually. Yeah, kitty. Yeah, okay, we'll go soon. I'm sorry I brought you here, but at least it's nice and cool. You get hot. Particular carrier. So yeah, I was that just popped into my head, the how they fuck with the psychics at the James Randi Educational Foundation, which totally could be like, through the works and everything, connected to the CIA. It was aided along by the CIA. They like finding the skeptics, and hey, if you think this certain gaslit, ruined way, we're going to prop you up. And because that's the message we want. So then, yeah, and then you're like spiritually disconnected. You've been like born into a spiritual war of some sorts. Doesn't really need to be that. If people could just like let families be themselves and shit, and then you recognize that having freedoms is going to mean that there's always going to be that evil that lurks in the dark corners that you can maybe do something about, or maybe you can't. I don't know the situation, but you should recognize the ones that you can't and try to focus on the ones that you can. You know, so yeah, I think there was that one chick that was forced to like eat food, and she was like tapping on her plate the SOS thing, and then it became like a new person. All of a sudden, it's a totally different person, and they're like, no, it's the same one. And they just gaslight you. They just totally straight up lie. And then that lie creates mud in the water, where you can't. There's been scuba diver stories I've heard about where someone, and he just went, left his buddy down there, and then he looked for his buddy and he couldn't find him, and he was like right above him the whole time, but there was so much that was kicked around in this one area that he couldn't see where his buddy was. But and anyway, so they like to muddy the waters because then nobody could think straight, and they benefit from all that stuff. And I just felt like ranting about some of this stuff. Anyway, and I'm over it. Like, yeah, people raped me a whole bunch with their children, and fucking like at Jimmy Dore in 2024, in May of 2024, he came to Denver, and they had that one family that sat in front of me, and it's always fucking like innocent looking ones too, right? The fucking innocent looking motherfuckers, they were dressed like they were going to church. All right, they like and everyone else is like dressed in their casual or kind of punk, maybe Harley biker type shit, right? And then they're like the only motherfuckers that are like dressed nicely, or quote unquote nicely, with their Sunday garb that they put on. It would be like a family like that would be jerking their family dog off in front of your children so they could try to mind control MK Ultra them. And they look innocent. That the business is about appearance is something they say, or they teach other people to say too. Business is about appearance, and it's like, well, because they're the ones wearing the suits, and I'm like, I never want to wear a suit ever, even as president, which I've kind of shifted my focus on that, because like if the president thing was like legitly like that, I would totally be down with that. But it is so captured now. I don't feel like doing evil for them. No, thank you. And I don't feel like being like, some space alien bitch. All right. That feels like downgrading my status, like joining the Illuminati, downgrade my status. So then I can't join, but I must lead. And it's been a weird year. This year is a little slower, like I'm gathering energy or something for the long fucking fight ahead. I haven't been working out this past month that much. I've been taking a break, like I do a few months, and then I apparently take like a month and a half off. And then I go back and I do it again, and I've been doing this for a while now, so it just kind of fits with the patterns. Yeah, I don't always want to be, doing the same shit, but then I don't know what to do. It's... And anyway, I need to crank out that book so I could have some extra, cheddar to actually do things. Yeah, it would be nice to just like get a like little place in the mountains, or make a little place in the mountains, and just find someone to nest with. Hopefully not a Zionist. I get that now. There's all this symbology stuff that I don't quite understand. Even though when I get really like, dilated, like my third eye and shit, like I see symbols, But I can't, I have such a bad memory sometimes, especially with like names. And I see like a symbol and I'm like, shit, I'm not going to remember that. Yeah, so yeah. Anyway, you folks have a lovely day. Peace the fuck out.